But not anymore. Now we're choosing to build a better America. An America that's confronting the climate crisis with America's workers leading the way. We're rebuilding an economy, a clean energy economy, and we're doing it from the bottom up and the middle out. I'm so tired of trickle down, I can't stand it.
Joe Biden just exposed the whole thing about EVs, and it is shocking people. Why? Well, the reality is this industry is on a crazy wild roller coaster, and the political arena is just making it a chaos, hiding the truth and reality from the public. You see, there is one question on everyone's mind. Are we truly prepared for the electric vehicle revolution? Do EVs really live up to their name, or is it just an illusion? What's the real truth? Well, with over $100 billion poured into EV manufacturing and infrastructure by automakers and governments alike, the stakes have never been higher. Staggering investment underscores not only the ambition behind the shift to electrification, but also hints at the complexities and challenges that lie ahead. The Biden administration has set an ambitious target. By 2030, 50% of all new vehicles sold in the United States are expected to be electric. However, as we stand on the brink of this monumental transition, pressing questions arise regarding its feasibility and sustainability. For instance, a growing number of EV owners are expressing regret over their purchases, with reports indicating that many are reverting to gasoline-powered vehicles. So it is essential to examine not just the technological advancements, but also the hidden motives driving this electrification push. And what Biden made clear is that this push for EVs isn't just about a cleaner planet, it's part of a larger political and economic strategy. We have been lied to. This is what they don't want you to know. But before we dive into that, subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. The EV reality check. Have you ever stopped and wondered if electric vehicles truly live up to the hype surrounding them? These eco-friendly rides have been painted as the shining future of transportation, flaunting promises of a cleaner, greener way to get around. The idea is alluring: zero emissions, reduced environmental impact, and an overall sustainable approach to driving. However, many EV owners are discovering that the reality can be quite different from the rosy picture that is often presented. You might have heard charging anxiety. This term refers to the ever-present worry that you'll run out of battery power before reaching a charging station. Sounds stressful? It definitely can be. This anxiety is heightened by the current landscape of charging station availability, which falls woefully short when stacked up against the nearly 1.5 million gas stations sprawled across the United States. In stark contrast, there are only about 50,000 public charging stations available. That's a huge disparity that understandably raises accessibility and convenience concerns for anyone thinking about making the jump to an electric vehicle. A good number of EV owners claim they frequently feel anxious about finding charging stations, especially during long road trips or when venturing into less populated areas where charging options become scarce. In fact, a recent survey from Consumer Reports found that over 60% of EV owners harbor worries about locating a working charging station when they really need one. Even when charging stations do appear, there are often long wait times involved, thanks to high demand or issues with malfunctioning equipment. A study conducted by Berkeley showed that about 20% of attempts to use public charging stations end in failure. Now let's shift gears and talk about reliability, which is another significant concern for those on the fence about purchasing an EV. Recent research indicates that electric vehicles tend to face a whopping 79% more issues compared to traditional gas-powered vehicles. Common complaints from EV owners range from glitches in battery systems and charging mechanisms to basic mechanical problems with body panels and even components inside the car. A survey from Consumer Reports found that many EV owners report frequent troubles with their vehicle's electric drive motors and other related systems. You'd want your car to be reliable, right? Well, it seems some EV models are falling short here. Adding further to the mix, the high-tech gadgets integrated into modern EVs often create unique reliability issues. It's not unusual for owners to run into software-related problems. Think connectivity issues with smartphones and navigational or infotainment screens not functioning properly. According to a study by J.D. Power, EVs face about 30% more problems related to features and controls than traditional vehicles do. Clearly, there's a noticeable gap in user experience. Plus, manufacturers frequently advertise impressive ranges, with some models boasting capabilities of up to 300 miles on just a single charge. However, the actual performance can fall significantly short due to a variety of influencing factors. For instance, let's talk about cold weather. You might be surprised surprised to learn that frigid conditions can impact battery performance, reducing driving range by a staggering 40% or more in some cases. In colder regions, batteries just don't operate as efficiently, which can lead to that promised driving range becoming much shorter in real-world situations. Plus, if you happen to have that need for speed or regularly use the climate control features, you can further diminish an EV's range. When looking at all these numbers, a comprehensive analysis reveals that while the Environmental Protection Agency estimates driving ranges based on ideal conditions inside a lab, the reality on the road can be drastically different. Real-world factors like terrain, weather, and personal driving habits all play a role in how far you'll actually go. For example, if you're driving a vehicle rated for 250 miles under perfect circumstances, you might be in for a rough surprise if conditions aren't favorable. You could find yourself with a usable range dropping to around 180 miles when the temperature dips or the road gets tough. And these are some of the reasons why people are changing their gaze. And can you blame them? The exodus. Recent studies show that a surprising number of EV owners, nearly half across the United States, are actually contemplating a switch back to good old gasoline-powered vehicles. In California, a state that has been a trailblazer in promoting electric mobility with its enticing incentives and decent charging infrastructure, this trend is particularly noticeable. According to a recent survey by McKinsey & Company, a staggering 46% of American owners of electric vehicles are considering making the switch back to internal combustion engine vehicles for their next car purchase. It's eye-opening, isn't it? So what's behind this change of heart? Well, where is what we talked about earlier? A lot of owners point to charging anxiety as one of their top issues. Take, for instance, a Los Angeles resident who had dreams of taking long road trips in their shiny new Tesla. However, they soon discovered that planning these journeys was not as glamorous as it seemed because of the scarcity of charging stations on their routes. This worry looms large as they constantly experience anxiety about whether they'll come across a working charger when the time comes. Then there's the home charging situation, which plays a pivotal role in the overall experience too. And people who buy new electric vehicles, even though they live in apartment complexes that don't even have any charging facilities, they are now left with no choice but to rely on public chargers, which seem to be either inconvenient when they need them the most or simply not available during peak times. This really puts a damper on their excitement and leads to serious thoughts about switching back to a gasoline car. The McKinsey survey brought to light yet another key issue. 35% of respondents pointed at inadequate charging infrastructure as the main reason for their disappointment with EV ownership. They quickly noticed that charging their car at public facilities ended up costing more per mile compared to what they used to pay for gasoline. Supporting this viewpoint, the McKinsey study notes that about 34% of respondents feel that the overall costs associated with owning an EV are simply too steep. This isn't just about the sticker price of the car itself. It includes other ongoing expenses related to charging and maintenance. The findings indicate that while those who charge at home might enjoy reduced operational costs, anyone without home charging access faces considerably higher expenditures when forced to rely on public infrastructure. And this makes you think about sustainability, even though EVs are the heroes of that. But what does that really mean? Are EVs really saving the planet? And when you hear the buzz about electric vehicles, it seems like they're the ultimate solution to our environmental problems, promising a cleaner and greener future. But hang on, if we dig a little deeper, we find that the reality of EV sustainability is a lot more complicated than it first appears. Let me explain. The first thing we need to talk about is the production of EV batteries, which hinges on rare earth elements like lithium, cobalt, nickel, and graphite. But here's the catch. Extracting these minerals comes with significant environmental costs. For example, lithium mining is astonishingly water intensive. Producing just 1 ton of lithium can require almost 2 million liters of water. That's a huge drain on local resources, particularly in areas like Chile, where communities are already struggling to meet their water needs. This intense competition for water resources can put agriculture and daily life in jeopardy, which is a major concern for residents. Then there's cobalt mining to consider. This process mostly happens in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where it's not just the environment that suffers. Ethical issues are also at play. Operations often involve child labor and result in significant deforestation and soil degradation. Plus, the carbon emissions emissions that come from extracting and processing these materials only add to the environmental damage. Who knew that getting the materials for EV batteries could have such massive repercussions? Now, let's talk about the carbon footprint tied to battery production. The numbers are pretty eye-opening. Estimates indicate that crafting a standard lithium-ion battery releases up to 220 pounds of carbon dioxide equivalent for every kilowatt hour produced. If we look at a typical 75 kilowatt hours battery pack, we'd be talking over 7 tons of carbon dioxide emissions just during the production phase. That's a big deal. It turns out that this manufacturing process contributes roughly 40 to 60% of the total emissions from an electric vehicle. Think about it, even though EVs produce zero tailpipe emissions while we drive them, they need to be driven for more than 50,000 miles to offset the carbon released during battery production. Of course, this figure varies based on specific factors, especially how the electricity used to recharge the vehicle is generated. In places where coal-powered plants dominate the energy scene, that mileage number could shoot up before an EV can claim to balance out its carbon footprint with internal combustion engine vehicles. Even with their operational benefits, the environmental advantages of EVs are significantly dampened by our reliance on fossil fuels to generate electricity. Shockingly, about 70% of global electricity still comes from non-renewable sources like coal and natural gas. This reliance means that while EVs themselves don't spew greenhouse gases during operation, the power fueling them often does. Consider regions heavily dependent on coal-fired power plants. The carbon footprints these plants leave can effectively negate the perks that come with driving an EV. On the flip side, in areas energized by renewable energy sources, think wind or solar, the benefits of EVs in reducing overall greenhouse gas emissions can be substantial. So what about the future? Well, projections suggest that by the year 2050, renewable energy sources might only make up about 40% of global electricity generation. Even though there's a strong movement toward cleaner energy worldwide, the transition is gradual and varies significantly from one region to another. The speed at which renewables can substitute fossil fuels will play a crucial role in determining how sustainable electric vehicles can truly be. So why are we being pushed towards EVs? You might have noticed that the transition to electric vehicles is making headlines all over the world. But here's the thing, this push isn't just about cool new technology or protecting the environment. It runs much deeper, tied up with political and economic agendas that shape how we think about cars today. Governments globally are stepping up their game when it comes to promoting electric vehicles. They're not just encouraging EV purchases, they're actively discouraging the use of gasoline vehicles. This shift shows up in many forms: stricter emissions regulations, financial incentives for EV buyers, and heavy penalties for manufacturers who can't meet environmental targets. Take a moment to think about the regulatory framework out there. Many nations have set ambitious goals for phasing out internal combustion engine vehicles. For example, the European Union has its sights set on banning the sale of new gasoline cars by 2035. That's serious business. These sweeping policies put pressure on consumers to embrace EVs, often without giving them the full picture of what such a switch truly entails. Now let's dive into subsidies and incentives. Governments are putting their money where their mouth is by offering significant financial perks to both consumers and manufacturers to encourage EV adoption. A prime example is the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, which offers tax credits for new electric vehicle purchases. But here's the catch: these subsidies aren't without controversy. They can strain public budgets and spark debates about whether they're sustainable in the long run. We can't ignore the broader geopolitical strategy either. Countries recognize their heavy reliance on foreign oil and are eager to reduce that dependence through alternative energy. The push for electrification isn't just about cutting emissions, it's about boosting national security by minimizing vulnerability to unpredictable global oil prices. Did you know that China now accounts for about 60% of all EV sales and production worldwide? That's a game changer. The scale of this figure underscores China's position as a dominant force in the EV sector. China isn't just leading in sales, it's also a key player in controlling vital raw materials needed for EV batteries, including lithium and cobalt. They manage a significant chunk of global mining operations, meaning they can dictate terms in international markets. This power dynamic can put Western manufacturers at a serious disadvantage, especially when they depend on these resources. Then there's the exciting world of export strategies. Chinese automakers are charging into foreign markets, often underpricing Western competitors. Take brands like BYD BYD and NIO, for example. They're entering European and North American markets with budget-friendly models designed to attract cost-conscious consumers. This aggressive pricing raises alarms about overcapacity in China's domestic market, leading many to fear a flood of inexpensive EVs into other countries. In response to this growing influence, Western governments are imposing trade barriers like tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. The US, for instance, has recently hiked tariffs on imports due to worries about unfair trade practices. However, these measures might not be as effective as hoped. They could simply incite retaliatory actions that escalate trade tensions even further. But what are the implications? Like, the ongoing geopolitical situation has a profound impact on oil prices and shapes the narrative that surrounds electric vehicles. We've all seen how recent conflicts in oil-producing regions can send oil prices spiraling. Nations with heavy reliance on oil imports can face significant economic instability when prices jump unexpectedly. The message is clear. Transitioning to EVs is being promoted as a solution to mitigate the risks tied to foreign oil dependence. But here's where we need to hit pause for a moment. Is it realistic to think that EVs can truly reduce our reliance on foreign oil given their current limitations? Sure, EVs eliminate tailpipe emissions, but they still require electricity to power up. And like we saw earlier in many regions, that electricity is still generated from fossil fuels. In places where coal is still a major energy source, the supposed environmental benefits of switching to EVs can dwindle. And what about the long-term viability of this strategy? As countries race towards energy independence through electrification, we have to ask, is this a sustainable path? The infrastructure needed for widespread EV adoption, like charging stations, is still lacking in many areas. This underdevelopment can hinder how readily consumers accept EVs and can limit overall market growth. Plus, the shift from gasoline vehicles to electric ones comes with its own set of economic challenges that need addressing. For starters, established automakers face significant hurdles in adapting production lines for electric vehicles. This transition demands considerable investments in new technology and manufacturing processes. Many legacy automakers are grappling with this shift. Some are even dealing with losses on every EV sold because of high production costs. Then there's the issue of job losses in traditional sectors. As the automotive industry pivots toward electrification, many jobs tied to internal combustion engine technology may disappear. Factories converting or shutting down due to dwindling demand for gasoline vehicles can leave workers displaced, often without sufficient retraining programs or support systems to help them transition. You might think that government subsidies would cushion the blow, but what happens when production costs rise? Although some consumers currently benefit from these subsidies, those rising production costs will likely end up driving dealership prices higher, as these legacy automakers feel the pressure to innovate while keeping costs in check. Those expenses might trickle down to consumers. Let's not forget about subsidy reductions. Governments worldwide are beginning to rethink their financial commitments to EV subsidies due to budget constraints brought on by other pressing needs. When these subsidies decrease or vanish altogether, consumers may be left facing higher upfront costs when buying an electric vehicle. So, as we dig into the push for electric vehicles, it becomes clear that it's shaped by this intricate mix of political strategies, economic pressures, and geopolitical maneuvering, especially considering China's growing influence. While moving away from gasoline vehicles may feel like a step towards sustainability and energy independence, it's crucial to critically examine the motivations underlying this shift. It's all about understanding how these agendas impact both consumers and industries on a broader scale. But what do consumers really think? It turns out consumer sentiment can be pretty mixed. The way folks perceive EVs is shaped by several key factors, including cost, convenience, and performance. Recent surveys show that while many people are optimistic about the future of electric vehicles, significant concerns linger that can't be ignored. When we look into satisfaction levels, a study by the National Renewable Energy Laboratory revealed something intriguing. 45% of respondents feel that pure electric vehicles are either just as good as or even better than traditional gasoline-powered cars. However, there's a twist. Only about 24% said they would consider buying an EV in the near future. Why the drop? Concerns mainly revolve around high purchase prices and the limitations of charging infrastructure. One major issue is cost. Many would-be buyers point to the hefty upfront price of EVs as a significant barrier to adoption. The image that electric vehicles are out of reach economically really hampers interest. Then there's the question of convenience, with over 75% of prospective buyers hoping for public public charging times to dip below 30 minutes. It's clear that many people are anxious about the availability and reliability of charging stations. But there is one thing that is happening right, which is giving EV enthusiasts a glimpse of hope: the price war. The ongoing battle over electric vehicle pricing is a fascinating and evolving saga for anyone considering making the switch. It's a whirlwind of opportunities and challenges that reshapes not only consumer choices, but the entire automotive scene. So let's dive into what this all means for you. Imagine this: you've been eyeing that sleek electric car for a while, but the prices were sky high. Well, thanks to fierce competition between companies like Tesla and BYD, prices are dropping faster than ever. This means more people can finally afford to drive electric. Just look at Tesla's recent cuts. They've made their models rival traditional gas guzzlers in terms of price. For those who are budget conscious, this is fantastic news. You're no longer stuck feeling like EVs are just out of reach. With tons of brands jumping in and slashing prices, you now have a treasure trove of options to pick from. This is all about variety and innovation. It's not just about getting an EV anymore. It's about finding one that checks all your boxes. Want something stylish under $30,000? You're in luck. The chances of finding a ride that fits your lifestyle without sacrificing tech or quality have never been better. And let's not forget about those sweet government incentives. Programs like tax credits are making it easier than ever to switch from traditional vehicles to electric ones. The Inflation Reduction Act is a game changer, potentially slashing the effective price of an EV. So, as more savvy buyers take the plunge, the cost of EVs is likely to drop even more, creating a friendly cycle of affordability. Now, while those initial prices are enticing, don't overlook the long-term savings. EVs usually come with lower operating costs thanks to less spending on fuel and maintenance. As tech improves and more charging stations pop up, the savings will really start to stack up. You'll end up feeling like you made a smart investment. But hold on, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Manufacturers slashing prices might sound great for buyers, but it can get dicey. If companies can't keep their profit margins healthy, they might face some serious financial headaches. Stellantis has already hinted at possible steep consequences if the pricing race continues. This worry could lead to cutbacks in research and development, and that's not what we want for the EV future. Now, here's something to ponder. As car makers cut corners to save money, there's potential for quality issues. If companies opt for cheaper materials or skimp on features, we could see some disappointing vehicles hitting the roads. This might shake consumer confidence in EVs, which wouldn't be ideal for long-term adoption. And then there's the risk of market saturation. With so many newcomers jumping into the EV fray, we could see a scenario where supply overtakes demand, leading to chaos and financial woes for manufacturers. It's a classic case of too much of a good thing. Plus, as sales soar, we can't forget the crucial need for charging infrastructure to keep pace. If there aren't enough charging stations, potential EV owners could hesitate due to range anxiety. And let's face it, if charging stations can't keep up, even the most attractive price tag won't persuade buyers to take the leap. This tumultuous landscape is undeniably shaping the way we view the future of transportation, and it's one to keep an eye on. What are your thoughts on the EV price battle? Are you tempted to join the electric revolution, or do you have concerns about the potential pitfalls? Let's know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next video.